I'm Carol Massar.
And I'm Tim Stenovec. On Tuesday, we learned of the passing of Charlie Munger, known for helping Warren Buffett build Berkshire Hathaway. We get more from Bloomberg's John Tucker.
Charles Munger served as alter ego, sidekick, and foil to Warren Buffett for almost 60 years as they transformed Berkshire Hathaway from a failing textile maker into an empire. A lawyer by training, Munger helped Buffett craft a philosophy of investing in companies for the long term. And even as his partner became a worldwide celebrity, known far and wide as the Oracle of Omaha, Munger believed Berkshire's success would outlast Buffett's star power.
In my opinion, Berkshire will flourish after Warren's gone. I don't think anybody is essential given the momentum we now have in place.
He didn't overstate his own importance either, sharing his vice chairman title at Berkshire in 2018 with two next-generation senior executives and affirming the company's commitment to a succession plan. I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
That was Bloomberg's John Tucker. Well, Munger passed away Tuesday at a California hospital. According to a statement from Berkshire Hathaway, he was 99 years old.
For a closer look at Munger's life and legacy, we had a long conversation with Bloomberg News reporter Noah Buhayar, who spent years covering Berkshire Hathaway, and someone who spent decades following and being influenced by both Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. Smead Capital Management founder and chief investment officer Bill Smead, also a longtime Berkshire investor.
First of all, I'm sorry because I know you know these individuals. Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett just together built something so iconic in the investment world.
Yeah, I wrote a letter to Buffett probably 5 years ago, just thanking him for how incredibly generous that him and Munger have been with all of us. I mean, it literally changed our lives.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Oh, by communicating the discipline that they practiced. They shared why they were doing what they're doing all these years in the writing, in the annual meetings, sitting there taking questions for 6 hours, all the way up into their 90s. It's like a gold mine of wisdom. I used to get irritated because I kind of wish they would restrict the questions to better questions, because as the years went by, there were a lot of goofy questions that came up.
But sometimes they got some goofy answers, which were fun.
Yeah, but here was this incredible resource.
Yeah.
Right. Charlie Munger was the Solomon of our era. He was the wisest man in the investment business. He was a Caltech grad, Harvard Law educated, right. Started a law firm in Los Angeles, had a successful career in real estate, a successful career in making common stock choices, and the right-hand guy to the most successful investment selector and asset allocator of all time. I mean, he is. We just admired him so much, and then of course we admired him immensely because he'd say exactly what he was thinking and didn't really care very much
Bill,
who he might offend in the process.
You mentioned that you've been doing this for over 40 years. What are some lessons that you've incorporated from Charlie Munger over these decades into the way that you manage portfolios and you allocate assets?
Yeah, when we're talking to people, I'm here in New York talking to some possible new customers, and we tell them when it comes to value people, we hold our winners to a fault, because compounding is the eighth wonder of the world. Hmm. So if you can find a business, let's just right off the top of our head pick Occidental Petroleum, who Munger and Buffett started buying in the last year and a half or 2 years. They're generating massive free cash flow. They're paying down debt with it, but then they're also buying back stock. So like Buffett says, over the years, if it's a company generating high returns on equity, high free cash flow, buying back their stock, he ends up owning a larger and larger and larger part of the business as the years go by. That's what he did with Coke. That's what he did with American Express. That's what he did with a lot of different companies. And holding your winners the fault is a key component of alpha. As I explain to people, you buy a stock at 30 and pay cash. The worst thing that can happen is it goes to zero. You lose 30 points of alpha. If you buy a stock at 30 and it goes to 90 and you sell it and goes to 210, you lose 120 points. And Buffett and Munger taught that to people as a powerful thing. It's much better to get a less spectacular company that you can hold all the way through a 10 or 15 times your money than it is a spectacular company that you might make 5 times in 5 years, but you got to be smart enough to sell it and go to another project.
Well, and you're something I want to ask you a little bit more too about what Charlie Munger was to Warren Buffett, what he brought out in Warren Buffett. Having said that, I want to bring Noah Buhayar into this because, Noah, it's one of those things where you think, as we're hearing from Bill, these are both brilliant men, successful men, and would have been on their own, but something about them together brought out even so much more.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point here. The combination of talents that they brought to bear really was deeply important in the evolution of Berkshire. The other thing, just speaking as a journalist, the thing that I always found so incredibly amazing about Charlie Munger was his directness and his willingness to speak his mind, even if his opinion wasn't necessarily a popular one. As a business reporter and someone writing about investing, you always knew that Charlie was not just going to give you the pithy quote, but something that actually had some real substance behind it. And I think that's, in large part what has resonated with a lot of investors over time. I mean, people would go, one of the things that's underappreciated about Charlie Munger is that deep into his 90s, people would go to Los Angeles to hear him speak at the annual meeting of a small publishing company called The Daily Journal. This was Buffett had nothing to do with this thing. They would just go to hear Munger alone. And I remember the first time I went to this thing, there were maybe 100 or 200 people. And, 3 or 4 years later, word had gotten out and a couple thousand were going. I mean, you have to understand, Charlie Munger was respected in his own right. It wasn't, he's often known for his affiliation with Buffett, but he really did have his own loyal following.
To back up Noah on that, one of our favorite things is when it comes to climate change, he just said, why don't we just build a seawall? Right? That was his opinion. It's like, okay, if it's real, let's do what they did in Amsterdam and just build a seawall in California and New York. And that's so simple and logical and less expensive, but that's Charlie Munger. It was always common sense, always won. The difference between the two men is Warren wants to die without any enemies. He has more of an urge to be liked. He's a wonderful man, and he wants to be liked, whereas Charlie could care less if he's liked. Right? He wants to share wisdom, share truth.
What was it like from the different meetings you went to and just kind of seeing them up on stage, things that kind of stood out for you?
Well, there's hardly any better comedy routine that's ever been done. Yeah. The back and forth. Of course, Munger had lots of the singers, but Buffett had plenty himself. And they played off fantastically. It was... I had a next-door neighbor that was 4 years ahead of me in school, and I had no brothers, 3 sisters, and he was one of 4 brothers. And he and I are extremely close friends, but he's 4 years older than me, in the same way that Munger was 6 or 7 years older than 6 years older than Warren.
Right.
But yet we met and we were finishing each other's sentences. And that's the way these guys were. They were finishing each other's sentences. They'd say the first part of the sentence, and they didn't have to continue because the other guy already knew what the rest of the sentence was going to be.
It's just that kind of relationship.
Yeah. Noah Buhayar, I'm so glad you're with us because we've been reading from your obituary nonstop for the last hour here. And, to Bill's point about this idea of common sense and not always needing to be liked, you mentioned this, some of his donations, and this one's at the top of mind for me because it's relatively recent. 4,500 person dorm on UCSB's campus, which actually got a lot of people interested in dormitory architecture who didn't think that they would actually be interested in dormitory architecture. But here Munger is trying to solve this problem of student housing, and he got a lot of blowback to this idea, and ultimately they canceled it. What happened?
Yeah, I mean, look, in his later years, Munger used these donations that he gave to universities to play architect. I mean, he was deeply, deeply interested in architecture, and he had some pretty unconventional ideas that I think really bothered people, and it became its own, subplot in its own right. But you have to understand, for Munger, he was a incredibly widely read person. He wasn't as narrowly interested in investing and how to make money. Obviously, he spent a lot of time doing that, but he had an interest outside of it. The other thing I wanted to add, and this takes us in a slightly different direction, but for all that Munger would sit up on stage and sort of act as the scold and the curmudgeon next to Buffett, he did have a generous heart, and when you talk to people who spent time with Charlie, he was a deeply nice and caring person, and on some level, this sort of curmudgeon stance he would take on stage and in public sometimes was a bit of an act, but it helped him make his points.
So, Bill, how do you think about Berkshire Hathaway going forward? They've obviously thought about succession, and there's Ajit Jain and Greg Abel, but I do think about Warren without Charlie, and what the impact that might be.
Yeah, so Charlie and Warren have set a team together to kind of come in. They've got two talented stock pickers in the wings. I'm guessing that this will be when they begin to emerge at the annual meeting. Greg Abel runs the operating businesses, and Todd Combs and Ted Weschler are running about $30 billion.
Two other important names.
That's who we think bought the home builders, for example, because it was smaller quantities than Buffett buys. And so that will cause their emergence. But Charlie's acerbic common sense and sensibility, there's just not going to be any replacing that talent. He was a genius in that. He would look at the situation and hit it only with the best logic, right? Each situation, regardless of who might be offended by the logic of it. Yeah. So he'd quote scripture, and then he'd support abortion rights, right? Mm-hmm. So, but logically, he was trying to solve a problem with money.
Right.
And the architecture thing just brings back to mind that he graduated from Harvard Law School and Caltech, and was an architect, and he was the Renaissance man.
Kind of different sides of the brain.
Just an unbelievable mixture of mental model talent. Just amazing. His family called him a book with legs because he was always reading. Our podcast is called A Book with Legs because my son Cole is a gigantic Charlie Munger fan, and that's what we call the podcast. We interview authors of books, so we call it A Book with Legs.
And he's quoted in Noah's story. Noah, we'll obviously be talking this all week and then some. Another thought, as you were putting together Charlie's story, for Bloomberg, what jumps out for you here?
Well, I think, to your point of what's next for Berkshire, it's a fundamentally bigger, different place than, where he and Buffett started. So while, on many levels, Munger is not replaceable, there are a lot of things that he and Buffett pioneered together that there's a lot of that's been written. There's a lot that has been passed on based in the way that these guys did things. Yeah. And again, Berkshire is a huge company now with different needs.
Right.
And but a lot of the ways that Munger and Buffett think about the company are certainly going to live on.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, Munger said in late 2021 that this was the largest financial euphoria episode in his career, which was 75 years. And then at the annual meeting this year, he said, I really don't think stocks are going to do very well the next 10 years. And then Buffett, I love this, Buffett chimes in, he goes, well, if I was running smaller amounts of money, I still think I could do really well.
Our thanks to Bloomberg News reporter Noah Buhayar and Bill Smead of Smead Capital Management. He's founder and chief investment officer at that company, and also longtime Berkshire investor. I'm Carol Massar, along with Tim Stenovec. This is Bloomberg.